I'm now joined down the line by former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh. Joe, welcome back to the independent Republican Mike Graham. How you doing?
Michael, brother, good to be with you.
Good to see you. We got loads to talk about, not least the situation in the Middle East. But let's kick off with NATO. Sweden obviously made their intentions clear. They're a lot closer to Russia than we are, and certainly than you are. And you can understand why they want to be in NATO. Do you see this as something that's going to put more pressure on Vladimir Putin to behave himself, or is it going to annoy him more?
Hey, I just want to thank Putin. I want to thank that thug and dictator, because Vladimir Putin is responsible for the expansion of NATO. He invades Ukraine and the rest of the world finally wakes up. I hope, Michael, this is a warning to my Republican Party here in the States to get off their ass and give aid to Ukraine right now, because they desperately need it.
Well, do you know what's worrying is that I was speaking to a military expert earlier this week, and he basically said to me that he thinks Ukraine is already lost. He thinks that sometime later this year, the Ukraine government will have to admit that Russia has won, not necessarily in every single part of Ukraine, but they will take a part of it, and that will be the end of it.
No, I don't buy that, Michael. Look, Russia has they've lost more soldiers than we lost already in World War II. And I know Putin doesn't give a damn about life, and he'll just keep throwing bodies out there like meat. But Ukraine so far is winning this war. They've decimated Russia's navy. Russia is running out of equipment. The problem is Ukraine right now desperately needs help. And the world is ready to stand with them. Everybody is. But again, Republicans here in America who are enthralled with Putin.
I don't know if they're enthralled with Putin, but what they're not enthralled with is giving more tax dollars to the government and to Zelensky. I think that's where people have a disagreement now, because you know as well as I do, Joe, that America has seen an awful lot of boots on the ground over the years, and I don't think many Americans want to see that being repeated. And you can't just continue to give money when you don't know where it's all going to end, can you?
And I agree with that, Michael. Very few Americans want to see American boots on the ground, of course. But we're not talking about American boots on the ground. And when it comes to money, like this $60 billion in aid, this isn't America writing a $60 billion check to Ukraine. This is $60 billion worth of equipment that is already there waiting, made by American companies with American employees, men and women. This stuff's already there. This is not a check. It's what Ukraine deserves. And I do beg to differ, Michael, on one thing. Donald Trump is rooting for Putin. Tucker Carlson, who is the voice of the Republican Party, Tucker Carlson has admitted he's rooting for Putin. This is where the Republican Party base is right now, and the world ought to wake up to that.
Well, I'm not sure that you will find an agreement between those who think Tucker Carlson did a good thing by going to interview Vladimir Putin and those who support Donald Trump, because I think a lot of the people that support Donald Trump have now considered to see Tucker Carlson as a bit of a lost cause, you know, spiralling off into kind of madness and talking about how great the streets of Moscow are because there's no bums and it's very clean. And the fact that you can get kidnapped off the street and stuck in a gulag doesn't seem to have occurred to him.
Michael, I talk to diehard Trump supporters every day. The vast majority of them had no freaking problem with Tucker Carlson going over to Moscow and getting on his knees in front of Vladimir Putin. They didn't.
Well,
again,
I don't have a problem with him.
Emphasize this.
But listen, Joe, I don't have a problem with him interviewing Putin. I mean, I'm glad he interviewed Putin, but he didn't get much out of it. Putin got a lot more out of it, it seems to me.
No, he'd have done a better interview if he wasn't on his knees for 2.5 hours. And he'd have conducted a better interview if he actually asked Putin a difficult question. He'd have conducted a better interview if he then didn't go to a Moscow grocery store and say Moscow is a better city than any American city. Again, most of America was outraged by this, Michael, but most Republican voters weren't.
I'm not sure about that, but I'll take your word for it as you're the man on the ground. Let's talk about your favourite presidential candidate, Donald Trump. How's he doing this week?
Hey, I am nothing but honest with you. If the election were held tomorrow, Donald Trump wins, Michael, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
Right now, it's not close. Biden has one job. He's got to prove to the American people he's up to the job, and he hasn't done that yet.
No, exactly right. What about Joe Biden today, though? I mean, we've been playing it all day. I don't know if we've got it here today to play to you, but you must have seen it. You must have seen Joe Biden announcing that his national security advisors are telling him there might be a ceasefire in Gaza. I think we've got it. Let's have a look.
Well, I hope by the beginning of the weekend. I mean, the end of the weekend. At least my national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close. It's not done yet. And my hope is by next Monday, we'll have a ceasefire.
I mean, I don't know what flavour ice cream that was, butternut pecan or, you know, whether it was cherry Garcia. I don't know what he was doing. What the hell's he doing holding an ice cream cone talking about a ceasefire?
Well, Michael, one serious point, and then I'm going to slap you upside the head. Look, I wish Biden hadn't said a damn thing about a ceasefire.
Right.
And by the way, I don't want a ceasefire. The only way there should be a ceasefire is when all the hostages are freed and when Hamas surrenders.
Yeah.
I don't want Biden saying anything. But Michael, come on. The ice cream cone, I love ice cream. I bet you love ice cream. I got no problem with Joe Biden having an ice cream cone.
Hang on a minute. You know how American politics works, Joe. This guy is constantly followed around by half a dozen Secret Service agents, probably twice that number of advisors. Surely somebody should have gone, hang on, guys, before the president speaks, let me just take the ice cream cone away from him so he doesn't look like an overgrown, you know, demented maniac.
Hey, the guy likes ice cream. Michael, have you ever gone out by yourself and had ice cream all by yourself?
No.
I have.
No.
Oh, my God.
I'm not a big fan of ice cream. This was me this morning, actually. I brought some ice lollies in to the Jeremy Kyle breakfast show because I said, you know, we're going to announce a peace deal with Hamas. You know, you just don't do it that way. That's not... It's like me sitting here, you know, with a pint of Guinness and saying, you know, tonight I'm going to do this show with a pint of Guinness. That's because it's what I always do. You don't do that.
Well, alcohol may have been a different thing. Like if he had had a beer announcing a ceasefire, I might have had a problem with that. But Michael, it was the middle of the day. He's having an ice cream cone. Again, conservative media in America is going crazy about this. He's a regular guy. I love it.
He's not a regular guy. He's a multi-millionaire who's been nothing but a taxpayer's dividend, who has only ever worked in the public sector and has now suddenly, you know, decided that he's the guy that will run the world for another 4 years. And he can't even work out when to put his ice cream down.
Well, the American people will decide if he gets to run the country again for another 4 years.
And you just told me if the election was today, they would decide that he shouldn't.
Agreed, because Michael, Joe Biden has not yet made the case that he's up to the job. The American people are concerned he's too old.
Yeah.
It's up to him and only him to dispel that.
Surely it's up to the Democrats to say to him, do you know what, Joe? Thanks very much for the last 3 years, but we don't really think you should be doing another 4. And I think we're going to come to the convention, and I think it's in Chicago this year, and we're going to say to you, you're going to step aside and we're going to find a better candidate, because otherwise, you know, I was listening to Anthony Scaramucci, who was on Rosanna's show just before mine, and he hates Trump even more than you do, and he calls him a man with no judgment. Hang on a minute, he's the guy that worked for him. So how much judgment has he got? But he claims this is going to be a disaster for the world. So surely if the Democrats have got any sense, they'll tell Joe to step aside.
That ain't happening, Michael. Look, our choice this year is between Joe Biden, who's a decent guy who happens to be really old, and Donald Trump, who is a psychopath, a traitor, and a criminal, who, Michael, also happens to be really old. Every time Trump speaks, he says about 30 or 40 stupid, insane, mistaken things.
But hang on, it's not about how old you are, Joe. As you know, you're only as old as you feel, you know. I mean, you might be surprised to find out how old I am, but I'm completely in control of all my faculties. Joe Biden clearly is not. And I'm going to pick you up on one of the things. You're alleging that Trump is a criminal. Donald Trump is not a criminal. Some people think he's a criminal. That's not the same thing as being a criminal. And frankly,
is Trump
I'm surprised.
in control of his faculties?
Of course he is.
Is Trump in control of his faculties?
Absolutely.
Michael, come on, man. When was the last time you listened to one of his 2-hour speeches?
Well, tell me when was the last time he said something that suggested to you that he was not in control of his faculties?
The last time he opened his mouth, he forgot his wife's name. He confused Nancy Pelosi with somebody else. He said the election was in November of 2027. He's constantly making mistakes. Yeah. If Joe Biden
maybe he's just doing it, but hey, Joe, maybe he's just doing it to wind up you lefties.
No. See, here's the difference, Graham, between you and me.
Yeah.
I will admit that they're both old dudes. You won't admit that about Trump.
No, I'm not saying that they're not old, but I'm not saying that they're incapable because of their age. Joe Biden is not incapable because he's old. He's incapable because he's lost the plot. And not only can he not remember his own wife's name, he can't remember what day it is. That's why he can't be president for another 4 years. Trump, on the other hand, is completely in control of his faculties. And if he makes the odd misstatement, I mean, it's easy to forget the name of your wife when you've had a few of them. You know what it's like, Joe.
He'll forget what town he's in. I'm talking about Trump. He'll forget where he's at. He messes up names constantly. He's always making mistakes, Michael, but we don't attribute it to Trump's age. We just say Trump's nuts.
And that seems even more unfair, and particularly coming from the Democratic side, which I know you're only a recent convert to. But at the end of the day,
I'm not a Democrat.
I know. Well, you are really, aren't you? You're not really a Republican, for heaven's sake. I mean, nobody talks like you do.
Hey, Michael, I bet
I'm
more conservative than you are.
You may well be, in social ways, perhaps, but not in political ways. You know, the point is this: you don't like Donald Trump. Lots of people do. And at the end of the day, it's up to the numbers game, isn't it? If more people like him than hate him, he's the next president.
Agreed. And again, right now, if the election were held tomorrow, Trump would win. Biden is behind. Thank God we've got 8 to 9 months, and thank God Trump will be out there saying more stupid shit left and right, which will really help Biden.
Well, listen, I look forward to continually talking to you as we get closer and closer. Might even come over and join you at one of these Republican conventions.
You piss me off every time I speak with you, but I'm falling more in love with you every time I speak with you.
This is the same effect I have on women, Joe. What can I say? Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. Joe Walsh there, reporting into us from the US of A. Still thinks that Donald Trump is absolutely insane. Do you? I don't.